is the nuclear reactors provided enough cheap energy. So I did, but it just okay. Okay, well, I think that would be too difficult to keep secret. There are too many people involved. Too many employees all over the. Too many employees all over the planet. That's like trying to. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour. And that's right, folks. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, I've got a couple of things I want to get into today. So let's just go ahead and get into this. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcast coming and the shows on the air. So if you enjoy the information, the shows, the hosts, the lectures, the topics, the discussions, and the truth, because this is one of the few networks bringing you the truth across the country, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the libertyworksradionetwork.com website. Get signed up as a subscribing member, even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month. We do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcast coming, and we sure would appreciate it. So you need to talk it up with friends, family, neighbors, relatives, and employees, workmates. Tell them to listen in, get informed, and find out what's happening in America and how to fix it. And if you want to get fully informed on the maladministration of the income tax by the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Justice, and the seditious judges of the lower courts who have been pushing their socialist philosophy instead of the written law, using judicial legislation and constitutional invention to enforce the tax on the American people illegitimately and seditiously in what can only be described as a treasonous plot afoot to undermine the republic and its solvency. You need to find your way over to AmericanTaxBible.com or tax-freedom.com or IRSZoom.com. Start reading, get informed, become educated, help to wake America up to what's been going on between the Federal Reserve Bank, the U.S. Treasury, the IRS, and the DOJ. It's not a system of taxation, it's a system of peonage, debt service. None of the money either sent in on April 15th or taken from your paychecks all year long. None of those funds go in the Treasury as required by law under Title 26, Section 7809, which says every penny collected as tax must be deposited into the Treasury on a daily basis. Now, that daily cycle is modified to a regular cycle by regulations of weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, or quarterly, and most employers send their taxes in quarterly, but somehow all that money they're sending in never makes it into the Treasury under your account number and name, which is required by 7809 as well. The law requires a deposit and a receipt recording the name and account number to which the tax payment is to be credited. That means on January 2nd, you've paid all the tax you need to because they took it out of their paycheck and the law says it has to go in the Treasury. So why didn't it go there? How come you have to file a return on April 15th to pay the tax? They took it from your paycheck. They told you it was tax. They said they had to do it. The law says tax goes in the Treasury, and it says that because tax is money for the government to spend. And government can't spend money that Congress can't appropriate from the Treasury. They can only spend what they can appropriate from the Treasury. So if none of the money goes in the Treasury, where's it going? Who's getting it? I'll tell you who's getting it. The Federal Reserve Bank is getting it. You don't believe me? Check the back of the last check you sent to the IRS. Read the endorsement. If it was tax that you paid, that you think you paid, it will say deposit to the U.S. Treasury. How much do you want to bet it doesn't say that? Oh, you don't want to bet. Yeah, I'll bet not. If you go and get that check, the banks don't give them back to you anymore. You have to ask for it. Both sides of the check, front and back. Because if you want to know what's going on in this world, you never listen to what they say. So you're not looking at the front of the check where they told you to write IRS or US Treasury. You're looking at the back to see who endorsed it, because that's what tells you where the money went. And that's how you find out what's really going on. You follow the money. And if you look on the back of the check you sent in, thinking you were paying tax, what you'll find is that it says, pay to any FRB. It doesn't say deposit to the U.S. Treasury, because it's not tax. There's no tax imposed on your right to work. You asked your employer to take the money on a W-4 allowance certificate. He's just doing what you asked him to do, but there's no law that requires it. In fact, the law forbids him from doing it if you inform him properly and make the right claim on the W-4. So, it's going to the Federal Reserve Bank, a private corporation. Why is a private corporation cashing your tax check? Again, because it wasn't tax. It's voluntary debt service that you assumed by asking the employer to withhold. Since it's not tax, the government doesn't have to put it in the Treasury. They're just not going to tell you that. And instead, they route it to the Federal Reserve Bank, who cashes the check and takes your money, using you as collateral for the $34 trillion in debt owed by your government to the bankers. The whole collective population of America has been thrown into this peonage debt service trap, where your wages are tapped to the tune of 30% and the money is routed to the Federal Reserve Bank, thus collateralizing and servicing the national debt of $34 trillion. But you have no obligation to service that debt. You only have an obligation to pay tax that is actually imposed. So this whole system is one of fraud, extortion, subversion, perversion, and sedition to undermine the financial solvency of the republic and to drive it into such great debt that the bankers can control every single aspect of our society. Which, if you hasn't noticed, is what's happening today. The Capitol is controlled, the Treasury is controlled, the White House is controlled, the farms are controlled, the factories are controlled, the banks are controlled, and the people are controlled. It's all controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank. People are laughing at Joe Biden. He controls nothing. He's an idiot. He got no idea what's going on. It's all being controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank, and all the money is pouring into the stock exchange on Wall Street. I've actually got an editorial cartoon from 1913 on the taxfreedom.com website that shows all of this happening, and the Federal Reserve is portrayed as an octopus with its tentacles ensnaring and entangling all of the entities I listed: the Treasury, the White House, the Congress, the banks, the farms, the factories, and controlling everything by controlling the supply of capital in society. Because in a debt-based currency, you constantly need new money to be created by loans. And when loans stop, then debt payments reduce the supply of currency in circulation. And when people realize that the currency supply is being reduced each month, little by little by little, eventually you hit a point where people panic and start hoarding their money. That's what happened in the Depression. When the currency disappeared, people started hoarding, and that exacerbated the lack of capital in society until ultimately there wasn't enough currency in circulation to support anything. And we only got out of it by the Lend-Lease Act of World War II, where Roosevelt persuaded the bankers to lend money to the government so that the government could lend it to Europe, so that Europe could send it back to buy war goods, munitions, supplies, weapons, tanks, ships, guns, clothing, uniform, ammunition, from the American companies producing it for the war effort. But it was all done by the government lending to Europe, and Europe buying it back. And that restarted the currency coming into circulation in sufficient quantities, one, to wage the war and maintain it, and two, to become a booming world economy after World War II, because America was one of the few developed places on the planet that wasn't torn apart and destroyed by the war, which of course was fought in Russia and Western Russia, in Europe and Western Russia, destroyed Europe. And that was pretty much the only other place on the planet that was producing besides America. So the rest of the world got torn down, and America was left alone with the supreme currency, and Europe owing them as a result of borrowing all that money to fund the war against Germany. So we've got the situation exacerbated today with the Federal Reserve Bank and the Treasury manipulating the interest rate and keeping it artificially low, which it turns out they've been doing. The U.S. Treasury has been buying the 10-year Treasury so abundantly and quickly. It's been monopolizing the auctions and preventing the Treasury yield from going up. Now, if it goes up just a little bit, the 10-year rises above the short year, and the yield curve disinverts and banks can start lending again. So it appears as though the Treasury is intentionally working to impoverish the American people by buying the treasuries and preventing the yield from going up to entice more buyers to come to market. And as long as the yield is intentionally kept below the short-term rate, you've got an inverted yield curve, and the banks in Main Street are going to get hit and go into recession and depression. So why is the U.S. Treasury engineering a depression in America? You tell me. I can't figure this out. They're either intentionally trying to destroy America, or they're just this stupid. They don't understand. You only need a half a point between the short-term and the long-term rates. You only have a half a point difference. It's just a half a point move, a quarter point by both of them, and you disinvert the yield curve, and the economy could get back to working again. But as long as the banks aren't lending, the economy is falling into the toilet, and it's going to become a vicious whirlpool down when people realize the currency supply is shrinking, except for the very wealthy on Wall Street, where all the money is pouring into the stock exchange, just as predicted 110 years ago. So it don't look good, and it's getting even worse. Okay, what else do we got? Okay, all of the aid money being sent by the United States to Palestine, Gaza, none of it is getting to the Palestinians who need aid. All of the food, all of the medical supplies, all of the materials, everything being sent to Gaza is being stolen by the Hamas terrorship leadership military that runs Palestine. They're taking it and selling it on the black market, and that's why there's no relief in Palestine for any of the people, because Hamas is stealing all of the aid that Joe Biden and his insane pack of idiots are giving to them to fund their war effort, to allow them to continue waging war, because the money is being sold on the black market to the highest bidder. It's not being given to the Palestinians. Joe Biden is as stupid as it gets. He's not only funding Hamas, he's funding Iran and Russia as well by keeping the price of petroleum so high, they make enough money to wage war. That was how Trump kept them quiet, with the price of petroleum down around $45 to $50 a barrel. They can't make money. They're barely getting by at that price. You jump it to $90 a barrel, $85 a barrel, and now they have enough currency to wage war till the cows come home. None of the aid is getting to Palestine. Joe Biden is funding both sides of the war and withholding aid to Israel, trying to run the war from the White House, just like Vietnam. That worked out well. Just like Afghanistan. How'd that work out? These idiots in the White House couldn't run a bathroom. Forget a war effort from 6,000 miles away. These people are just as stupid as it gets. He's made every single foreign policy mistake you could possibly make. He hasn't been on the right side of a foreign policy decision in his entire political career. Okay, maybe there's one. I can't name it, but somebody probably can. Maybe there's one. Okay, it turns out, of course, that Obama, Biden, and Kerry at State, when they were in power, were actively interfering with FBI investigations, preventing them from making arrests of Iranian terrorists in America and others supporting the Iran nuclear program, trying to steal nuclear secrets, spying and getting caught, But Obama administration stepped in and prevented the FBI from making the cases and pressing them in court because they wanted the Iranians to come to the table and sign a nuclear deal. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Betray America, let the criminals run amok so that you can gain political points with an enemy that isn't giving you political points, is taking advantage of your gullibility, your stupidity, your incompetence. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. Coming to you live. And freedom comes from God, not government. God's truth shall make you free, and God's true plan for mankind is freedom. Freedom achieved through faith in God, not government. If you misplace your faith in any entity besides God, your faith will be used against you to betray you and enslave you, no matter what entity you put it in, whether it be the king or the president or a philosophy. Whatever you put it in, it will be used against you to betray you and enslave you. That is the history of the government of mankind. Only God delivers freedom through the freedom of the Spirit, through truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So, as goes the currency, so goes the fate of the nation. They're running it out, folks. We need to rein it in, or we're going to be in real trouble. Oh, I got one more news item here. NIH, as I reported in one of my shorts, was acting intentionally to hide and keep secret by deleting emails and eliminating evidence about the true COVID origins, the gain-of-function research being funded by NIH. The emails were destroyed to avoid FOIA requests for evidentiary documents. Rand Paul was right about everything. Fauci was lying when he denied funding gain-of-function research in China. It was straight-up lies to Congress. The man should be indicted and prosecuted for lying to Congress. And now it comes to light, they were deleting the emails to hide the fact that they knew this was all fake and disinformation, and that they were the ones passing it out. Not the people saying it came from China. It was gain of function that you funded. Absolutely, Rand Paul was right. Everybody in the media, all wrong, and lying about it. Absolutely seditious. Knowing and intentional defrauding of the American people to escape culpability. And you know, that guy Fauci made millions of dollars on the royalties on the patents. It was he that had the royalties on this stuff. 25 million is what I heard. It could be a lot more. Okay, I got a story that I want to get to. I'm going to read it because it's going to take a while, I think. So let's just get right into it. The income tax system may end because of this man's case. Everybody in America knows that there is something very, very wrong with the way that the IRS operates and the way that the federal courts let them get away with it. This case that I'm about to tell you about exposes it all. So, do you believe in God or government? That is the true question. And to that end, an American patriot, Ken Cromar, in Utah, who does believe in and has faith in God and not government, needs both your help and your support. But he is not asking for your money as he sits today in jail on false charges. Only your help in publicizing this story, exposing the blatant sedition and treason being committed in the federal courts by the weaponized against Americans, DOJ and federal court judges, weaponized in the name of tax only, under color of law and color of judicial office. So please, if you find this story as hard to believe as I do, as outrageous and inconceivable in America as I do, please share this information with others. Urge the media to pick up the story and broadcast it to America. And please do anything else you can think of to help this American patriot expose the truth about the 16th Amendment and the federal personal income tax, while faithfully pushing forward under God's plan to set all Americans free once more. Specifically, free from the subversion and perversion of our Constitution and tax laws that is occurring in the name of tax and color of law. to tax labor directly and not profit, i.e. income, indirectly, which taxation he is fighting against in a truly valiant effort to restore the enforcement of the constitutional limitations that are imposed by the Constitution on all taxing powers, which have been violated and destroyed by the perverse and subversive and seditious income tax as it is wrongfully enforced today by the IRS, DOJ, and lower federal court judiciary, as a direct tax on labor under the 16th Amendment without any applicable limitation, which was never intended and cannot be for the irrefutable lack of an enabling enforcement clause in that amendment. This unauthorized enforcement of an ungranted power to tax without limitation is an administrative and judicial crime against America being treasonously committed in the lower federal district courts and circuit courts of appeals all across America. Now, only God by truth can save we the people. So will you help to spread the truth? And if you've heard me talk before, you know that what the courts are enforcing is judicial legislation and constitutional perversion, not tax law. Mr. Cromar is a true American patriot from Utah, currently being held in jail pending federal criminal trial on 3 false tax charges. That trial started yesterday. 3 charges that are entirely inappropriate by the language of the statutes themselves, and which charges are not supported by the facts of the dispute. But to begin our story, we should probably review at least some of the factual history between these 2 litigants, Mr. Cromar and the United States. In the beginning, Ken Cromar did nothing more than exercise his constitutional rights to due process at law, to be secure in his person, houses, papers, and effects, and to not be compelled to testify against oneself. By asking the government, the DOJ, and the federal courts too, before filing any tax return at all for any year, to show him how, under the law, it is and can be today positively determined from what's in the law that a Form 1040 is a form or the form that is actually required by law to be filed by an American citizen living and working in the 50 states of America, in order to satisfy the legal filing requirement associated with the federal personal income tax imposed under Title 26 United States Code, that's the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, Section 1, tax imposed. And because the collective U.S. government refuses to address and answer that question, Ken has refused to abandon his faith in God and has not filed any tax returns for over 25 years because no one from the government, the DOJ, or the judiciary can or will explain, using the law, rather than because we say so, how the determination of the requirement of the filing of a specific form, the Form 1040, has been made from the provisions of the law. Or is there some other actual requirement that has been kept hidden from the American people for 85 years? Or is it simply because that is the form the IRS puts in the U.S. Post Office every year for everyone to use? Is it law? Or is it habit, custom, historical practice, and possibly myth? The details in this criminal case reveal the truth about all of these things. But Time and Space Limitations Act to prevent further investigation herein. If you want all that information, you want to head over to taxfreedom.com and start reading, because it's all exposed there. The article goes on. So, against that background of simply asking reasonable questions about the laws that the DOJ alleged existed, but would not identify, repeatedly refusing to do so, the DOJ filed a civil suit against Mr. Cromar in 2018 to foreclose on he and his wife Barbara's home and property. Yeah, Ken and Barbie, yes. However, at the civic trial, the DOJ refused to properly establish the subject matter jurisdiction of the court that could be lawfully taken by the court over the civil tax enforcement action, claiming jurisdiction could be taken under statutes alone without any need to identify the specific constitutional foundation for the claim that tax was owed. In other words, they refused to identify if the tax they were pursuing the civil enforcement of in the court was direct or indirect, or if it was an impost, a duty, an excise, or something else. They refused to argue further. The plaintiff, United States, refused to argue any further, insisting statutes alone were sufficient and insisting jurisdiction could be taken under statutes alone. This, of course, is patently absurd, as any and every claim for tax must be grounded in the constitutional foundation of a specific power to tax, which must be identified as granted, or the defendant has not been properly informed of what tax he is accused of failing to pay. And the tax claim thus becomes vague, arbitrary, and capricious as an unidentified and undefined tax, claimed owed without specific constitutional foundation to actually identify the nature of the tax. As the statutes invoked by the United States typically reference the enforcement of any tax. Okay, they can enforce any tax. Now please tell Ken and all the other defendants in America for the last 85 years which tax it specifically is, or was, that is claimed owed. But in the district court, in the civil action in 2018, the government refused to disclose that fact and information or argue further. And the district court itself refused to make them speak to this requirement to establish the subject matter jurisdiction of the court that can be lawfully taken by it over the claims brought to the court in the complaint. When Cromar, the defendant, Ken, refused to answer the vague and arbitrary complaint because the tax claimed owed wasn't identified or defined in the complaint, making it vague and arbitrary, because he wasn't told what the constitutional foundation for the tax claim was, or what the nature of the tax that was being pursued was, and that without that information it was impossible for him or any defendant to answer such a vague, arbitrary, and capricious complaint, simply demanding monies be paid without explanation or underlying foundation. Then, the district court itself also refused to address the requirement to properly establish the constitutional foundation for the subject matter jurisdiction of the court to enforce the tax allegedly at issue, undefined as it was at the time, under the U.S. Constitution by clearly showing on the record of the action in the court, 1, the specific taxing power granted, the first element of subject matter jurisdiction. 2, the enabling enforcement clause giving Congress the authority to write law to enforce that specific taxing power, identified in 1, that's Leg 2 of subject matter jurisdiction. Leg 1, power granted. Leg 2, Congress was authorized to write law. And 3, the only part of jurisdiction they did provide, the statutes providing for the enforcement of the unidentified, vague, and arbitrary any tax. But it's not really just any tax that's enforceable under these statutes. It's any constitutionally granted tax and taxing power that is also constitutionally made enforceable at law by an enabling enforcement clause that applies. So without properly establishing the subject matter of the district court to entertain the action, and without any actual trial of any evidence, and without any jury, the district court granted default judgment to the government because Cromar would not and could not answer a complaint that did not properly and fully identify the accusations made, sufficient to allow them to be answered at law by any defendant or attorney in the country. And then, before any appeal in the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals could be had, the district court refused to stay enforcement of the judgment pending appeals, ordered the Cromars' house and property seized under judicial order to enforce the default judgment. Okay, this is Thomas Fried on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and let's just get right back into this. I'm reading about the current criminal case being prosecuted in Salt Lake City, Utah against Ken Cromar on 3 criminal tax charges that are completely fraudulent, and let's keep going. And then, before any appeal in the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals could be heard, the district court refused to stay enforcement of the judgment pending appeals and ordered the Cromars' house and property seized under judicial order to enforce the default judgment. Then the court ordered the home to be auctioned off and sold, which was then done in a manner that clearly violated the laws controlling that process. Next, on appeal in the 10th Circuit Court, the plaintiff United States changed their argument regarding the alleged subject matter jurisdiction of the court that could be lawfully taken, admitting in the Circuit Court of Appeals that it was, surprise, allegedly the 16th Amendment that they now argued was serving as the constitutional foundation for the claims for tax made in the complaint filed in the lower district court, where they had previously argued statutes alone are sufficient. Now they admit statutes alone are not sufficient. It's based on the 16th Amendment. Now, any person who has studied even just a bit of law can tell you that litigants are not allowed to change in the higher appeals court the claim to subject matter jurisdiction or the argument made to establish that in the lower court. Just the changing of the argument is alone sufficient to establish that there was no proper establishment of the required subject matter jurisdiction in the lower court that was ever done, which voids the judgment of the lower court for lack of subject matter jurisdiction, which had indeed acted unlawfully because it acted without the subject matter jurisdiction to act at all ever being established on the record of the action in the court. They acted under statutes alone without a constitutional foundation, and in the circuit court the government changed its argument, saying it's the 16th Amendment. That fact was proven to be true in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals when the plaintiff changed their jurisdictional argument in that court, admitting for the first time, surprise, that there did need to be a constitutional foundation for a tax, and then arguing erroneously that the foundation was alleged to be the 16th Amendment, which of course is not possible in a criminal trial for lack of an enabling enforcement clause therein to constitutionally authorize Congress to write any law thereunder to enforce that power, civil or criminal. There's no authority to write law given to Congress. You can't take jurisdiction unless you can show Congress was authorized to write the law that's being used. And you can't do that when you claim it's under the 16th Amendment. There's no authority to write law there. And that is also not what the Supreme Court ruled in the decisions it took in 1916 in the Bruchaber v. Union Pacific Railroad Company, 240 U.S. 1, and Stanton v. Baltic Mining, 240 U.S. 107, both in 1916. And that is not what the U.S. Congressional Research Service has been telling the American people in Congressional Research Service Report number 79-131A for 50 years. And it's not what the U.S. Congress declared was the constitutional foundation for the income tax on the congressional record in November of 2018, just before it reenacted the federal personal income tax law in December of that year. That was the new Trump tax law signed by President Trump in December, made active January 1, 2018. And the constitutional authority statement declared the constitutional authority was taken under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution, and not under any authority of the 16th Amendment. And this is according to Congress and their stated intent for enacting the legislation, stated as the intent in the congressional record as required by law. But when Mr. Cromar had made that factually correct argument in the district court and in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in his civil case, he was told by both courts that it was frivolous to argue that it is Article 1, Section 8 that is the actual constitutional foundation for the federal personal income tax. And his appeals were summarily dismissed without honest consideration or analysis being made in or provided by either the court. So even though Congress declared it was Article 1, Section 8, the court decided, no, we're not doing what Congress said it was doing. We're making it up on our own. Judicial legislation. Courts do not make law, nor do they make up invented powers under the Constitution. The 16th Amendment doesn't contain the word direct. It has never been a direct tax. It has been indirect from the beginning, and the Supreme Court has been consistent. The Congressional Research Service is consistent. Congress has been consistent right up to 2018 when they reenacted it under Article 1, Section 8. So, 5 years passed, during which there were a number of unsuccessful attempts by Mr. Cromar in both federal and Utah state courts to seek relief and legal redress for the wrong done to him by the collective elements of the federal government, the IRS, the DOJ, and the federal courts. Which brings us to today, where in the same federal court as before, the District Court of Utah in Salt Lake City, Mr. Cromar has now been wrongfully charged again with alleged violations, this time of 3 criminal statutes for allegedly committing violations of 3 Title 26 tax laws for opposing the wrongful enforcement by the court and the Marshal's Service of the court-ordered Title 28 judgment enforcement, where his house was seized and auctioned off under order of the court. And get this, now in the criminal trial, when challenged again by defendant Cromar to identify and establish the subject matter jurisdiction of the court that can be taken, the plaintiff United States again refused to argue, other than to argue that jurisdiction over the criminal charges could again be taken under statutes alone, as erroneously argued previously, and later, of course, contradicted in the circuit court. And that, again, no constitutional foundation was necessary, they argued, to establish the jurisdiction of the criminal court to enforce criminal law against a citizen. We don't have to show you where the law is authorized to be written by Congress. Again, the United States refused as plaintiff to identify the required constitutional foundation for the tax, just as they had fraudulently done so 6 years before in the civil trial. And when defendant Cromar pointed out that there is no enabling enforcement clause in the 16th Amendment for the court to show that Congress was constitutionally authorized to write criminal law to enforce this alleged newly created power to tax directly under authority of the 16th Amendment without any applicable limitation, the government again refused to argue in reply. So again, the district court decided it needed to help the United States prosecute its criminal case now, and thus began arguing for them, explaining at a hearing, without argument from the plaintiff United States, in opposition to the defendant's motion to dismiss, that the jurisdiction of the court was taken under Article 1, Section 8, where the enabling enforcement clause therein enabled Congress to write law to enforce the tax crimes alleged. When Cromar pointed out that the court was stopped by the previous 16th Amendment holdings in the same district court, affirmed on appeal by the 10th Circuit, with the same litigant on the same issue, and thus the court was barred from taking jurisdiction under Article 1, Section 8, specifically because of those previous rulings. And because the claim had been deemed frivolous in the district court, and the 10th Circuit too, 7 years before, when Cromar argued it was Article 1, Section 8. So today, the district court is trying to use the exact argument that the court said was frivolous when Cromar advanced it 7 years ago. And now the court itself is trying to use it to establish jurisdiction over 3 criminal charges under Article 1, Section 8. They're barred from doing that. So the district court is now blatantly and patently violating the 3 controlling and now applicable legal doctrines of collateral estoppel, judicial estoppel, and estoppel by judgment, that all work under this case's circumstances to prevent and bar or stop any federal court or a litigant from using a reversal of their previously argued successful position or decision taken. in order to continue ruling against the same opposing litigant in the same or subsequent litigation. So first they changed the 16th Amendment and said Article 1 is frivolous. Now they're claiming Article 1 is the basis for the litigation, the criminal litigation, but they're barred. They can't change the subject matter jurisdiction claimed. They're stuck with the 16th Amendment, and they know they're stuck because they don't have an enabling enforcement clause. So to reach out to an enabling enforcement clause, the court's reversing the previous decision of the higher circuit court and claiming it's Article 1, Section 8, and continuing with conducting the trial. It's as fraudulent, perverse, and subverted as it gets. This is sedition of the highest order being perpetrated by the district court in Utah. Pure treason, pure sedition, pure legal nonsense. These are crimes being committed by the court, which stole the house without subject matter jurisdiction and is now trying to put the man in prison without subject matter jurisdiction while violating the decisions that were handed down before and should control that issue now. A decision already made cannot be redecided. On the contrary, in order to continue litigation in a manner that ensures only one side constantly wins and the other constantly loses in each and every trial litigated. These legal doctrines of collateral estoppel, judicial estoppel, and estoppel by judgment declare and command that once an issue, like the subject matter jurisdiction of the court that can be lawfully taken to enforce tax law, has been settled by the court, it cannot be changed later in the litigation that occurs between the same two litigants. All parties are legally bound by what was previously settled, and the district court is now bound in this criminal action by what was held in that previous civil action. And the district court is now wrongfully trying to use a reversal of the decision it took in the civil action in order to reach out to find and use a required enabling enforcement clause, necessary to show that Congress was constitutionally authorized, or at least allege it, to write law to criminally enforce a direct tax without limitation against American citizens under authority of the 16th Amendment alone. You can't get there from here without blowing everything up. There is no constitutional authority given to Congress to write law, to enforce a new taxing power under authority of the 16th Amendment. This is specifically why the Supreme Court rejected the argument in 1916 that a direct tax was authorized under the amendment, ruling in Baltic Mining Super that the tax was inherently indirect. Since lawful indirect taxation by duty, impost, and excise does not reach the labors or the fruits of labor of the American people derived from activities conducted by right, and which fruits are not derived from participation in any federally taxable activity or privilege subject to excise taxation, there can be no tax that reaches the labors of the American people with legal effect as a tax under Article 1. And since there is no enabling enforcement clause in the 16th Amendment to authorize the U.S. Congress to write law, neither the District Court nor the U.S. 10th Circuit Court of Appeals were able to properly establish the subject matter jurisdiction of the courts in the previous civil action against Mr. Cromar 7 years ago. And thus the judgment is rendered void and should have been vacated when the plaintiff United States changed its argument for jurisdiction in the higher 10th Circuit Court in that previous civil litigation. The change of argument alone renders void the district court default judgment in the civil action, and in the criminal action today, the district court again lacks the required subject matter jurisdiction to proceed under the 16th Amendment as previously held for lack of an applicable enabling enforcement clause therein. Knowing that fact to be true, the district court today frivolously reaches out to Article 1, Section 8 in blatant violation of all three of the now controlling estoppel doctrines, in a desperate attempt to find an enabling enforcement clause that it can misrepresent as authoritative to a pro se defendant who isn't supposed to know about the three legal estoppel doctrines. You know, I think we're coming up on the end of the show. I'm going to have to come back and finish this next week. We will do that, believe me, because I'm going to Utah this week to testify in this criminal trial to help this man and explain to the jury there what's been going on for 75 years and how to fix it. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We'll be back. Well, actually, we'll be back. I can't do next week because I'm going to be flying back on Thursday unless things get extended and I have to stay an extra day for something. But yeah, I'm flying out. I'm flying. And hopefully I'll have fun stuff the next week to talk about because the government has fucked this case up so bad it isn't even funny. And this is just the jurisdictional part. Well, I know, but I've got a jury. I've got a jury of people who I can present the law to, and the government has already fucked this up. He's there defending himself as a pro se. The first day he got the agent on the stand to admit he can't show you a law that requires you to file a return. The government admitted that. It's almost like they're trying to throw the case. Yeah, the executive directed verdict on the charge. A dismissal of the charge. It's so. Get this. The judge told him that he probably would have grounds for it after another admission where he read the 6020B2. Well, he's in the courtroom, and this judge isn't taking motions from him unless they're in writing. So the judge won't. We already wrote that motion pre-trial, and the judge wouldn't entertain it. Now he's telling me he has grounds for it. I already wrote that motion. We already wrote it. Yeah, no. Yeah, well, no, we're already trying to pull this out into the circuit court on interlocutory appeal. Yes, I understand. Yep, I understand. Yep, well, yeah, but he's he's in jail and can't and has limited ability to do things. So he needs to focus on. It is. Well, I've been writing everything for him, but it's admitted facts that destroy the charges. It's absolutely right. So yeah, no, yep. Well, I have to talk to him again to. Yep, no kidding. I have to talk to him again tonight. Well, yep. Well, I, 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 I need to speak with it. Yep. Well, yeah, no, I yep, understood. Yep, I know that. No, 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 no. They're still pressing the case, and I have to talk to him again tonight. As the, right, right. Well, well, no, no, no. We understand that, and I need to talk to him again to make sure I understand the situation right. Because if they're just talking, well, admitting that there's no requirement to file a return doesn't destroy the case because they allegedly did returns for him. So we might want to go a little bit further with their witnesses and testimony and admissions that we can exact before. And then, as you say, and then as you say, and then as you say, and then as you say, yeah, no, that's why they did this. That's why they allegedly. That's why they That's why they allege. That's why they did allegedly the SFR. So we're going to disprove that. But as you say, yes, and when they're done with their case, when the, well, you should be done. Well, no, no, you you have to attack that and the sixth. Well, well, you. Well, this judge isn't going to let that happen. No, no, no. We're going to wait until the prosecution rests, and then on Tuesday, when things, we'll put the motions in. He will. He will. He will. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. He will. I can put it all together over the weekend. Yeah, I know. No, no, no. It'll be filed in the court Tuesday morning before the court starts session. Well, he will. He will. Yep. Agree. Agree. Agreed. But the proper time to make that motion is when the prosecution rests. Then you hit them with the motions that the whole case is fucked because they didn't make it. They didn't make a case. Yeah, but they're gonna well they're gonna admit other things, and I want to put them all in one dismissal rather than in three or four. No, everything is already written. All I have to do is take one paragraph out of four different motions that have already been written. That's well, an admission that there is nothing asserts what we've already written. So I just have to, well, that's easy. That's easy enough to do. Yeah, well, that's okay. Like I say, I can write all of this quickly because it's already been written. Yeah, the only thing that's missing is Agent X on testimony admitted duh. So you have four sentences on which Agent admitted what, and the four paragraphs of the pre-existing motions laying the argument out. I mean, they're really simple arguments, and he's admitted every single one of them. So it's really weird. It's really well. Okay, get this. The statute that you're charging him under is 7212B, which says interfering with a seizure made under this title, Title 26. Okay? The seizure that was made was done by court order under Title 28 as a function of judgment. There was no Title 26 seizure. The whole statute is misplaced. It's charging someone for interfering with a Title 28 martial action instead of an IRS action for levy, which the statute is intended to apply to. All the criminal, all of the punishment, all of the punishment authority that lies with interfering with the marshals is in the contempt of court power of the judge that issued the order. But he didn't do that because he felt guilty about stealing the property, so he let it go. And the IRS is now trying to come in and charge him with Title 26 violations for interfering with the Title 28 process. And he didn't even really interfere with it. He just objected to it, followed the list pendants, passed out notice at the auction to try and discourage buyers. So they're essentially using, they're fucking out of their mind going to the just Title 26 seizure for levy under a Title 28. I did. I did. It's already been laid out, and subject matter driven motions to dismiss. That they never answered. The court just denied. No issue, no substance, no denied. Well, like I said, I know, I understand. I know you're right. I'm not arguing. I just don't want to turn. I can't. No, I can't. I can't do a new document every single night. I want to do one that covers it all when they rest. I understand. No, well, he's pro se. All he's got to do is make a good record. Yeah, right. Right. For me. Take care. Bye-bye. Two weeks.
Probably another manga. You just tell me. Just tell me, what do you think did it?
I think Luke Cates did. Chris Cates' father. Found out he had a history of violence, went to jail for aggravated battery. Just let him know I'm getting Chris Cates' thing.
No.
Well, I know you hate doing this, but could you try? You're stuck with us anyway, just try. You're smart.
When you get that figure in, I shut my paperwork. It might take me a lot longer, but from now on, this case is nothing but routine paperwork to routine. We got some news. Let's sit down and tell you what it is.
So we're pretty up. So these are this